Hey everybody, I'm JJ. You're watching Reality Survival. So I had a subscriber say the other day that I should go back and revisit some videos that I've done in the past and kind of update them for current days. So I thought I would do that today. This video is going to be the top 10 SHTF events that might actually happen. Just my guesstimation of the things that would be most likely to cause severe disruptions in your life or my life or whoever's watching. So these are not really in any particular order because any of them could happen. So let's just start with number 1 and work our way down to number 10. Number 1 is high probability weather events. I've talked to you guys about this for a long time, but as you know, tornadoes, forest fires, hurricanes, snow and ice storms, flooding, these things happen and they affect people all the time. If you do a little bit of planning ahead of time, you can be in a better situation so that they don't have as big of an effect on you long term, okay? So that's part of what prepping is all about, in my opinion. Number 2 is job loss. This is probably going to be something that could affect you in the near time future, depending on what your job is. And I say that because with technological advances in artificial intelligence and robotics, self-driving cars and trucks, this is going to affect more and more people as we move into the future. And I'm really only talking about a couple of years into the future. It is going to be happening more and more frequently. That is a fact. And so you need to think about that, you need to think about your career choices and try to insulate yourself from that by having a side gig or a side hustle, some way that you can make some additional money on the side so that if that happens and you get hit with, a pink slip or a yellow slip or whatever it is at your job, and they say, hey, sorry, we're going to have to lay you off or you're not going to be able to work anymore, then you can kind of ramp up that side gig a little bit until you can find other work. So just something to think about. Number 3, and I'm afraid that this one might be one of the most likely and most devastating on this whole list, and that is apathy and complacency in the political process. Withdrawal from the political process is a huge deal, and we need to keep a watchful eye and to keep ourselves from doing it, and to make sure that elected politicians are doing what they say that they're going to do and holding them accountable through the electoral process. There's a lot of people out there, especially in the prepping community, who just don't want to be involved anymore. They say, oh, it's not worth it, the system's rigged, I don't want to take part in it. That is exactly what they want you to think. Nothing could be further from the truth. There might be fraud happening in some specific counties, especially those purple counties that are really close to being 50-50 split. If people on one side decide to just sit it out and not be involved, that gives people on the other side a huge advantage because then they can go in and do more fraud. But if people on the one side are more involved and they go and they get more involved and they keep a watchful eye on things, that will lessen the fraud and make it less likely to happen. So we need people, especially in those purple counties that are 50-50 split, to be more involved, not less. Okay, let's see here. Number 4 is a massive cyber attack. I think it's really likely, especially going into, and we'll talk a little bit about this here in a second, going into a situation where it looks like Ukraine and Russia might be getting into a tussle. We've got China and Taiwan that could be having issues. We've got India and Pakistan that's always a problem. Iran and Israel that's always a problem. There's just lots of regional issues going on around the world. As that happens, people who are wanting to instill chaos into the world might try to do massive cyber attacks to weaken the United States as well. So, a couple of years ago, Putin publicly stated that World War III has already begun and that this war is going to be fought through digits. You had the WannaCry virus. We've had lots of examples of ransomware, recent attacks on infrastructure worldwide. Ukraine just experienced some attacks on their infrastructure recently. I just think that this is highly likely that it could potentially happen, and it will continue to happen now and into the future. So make sure that you've got all of your online stuff squared away and secured. Make sure you're using VPN. Make sure you're using like a secure email system like Proton. Use Signal, the Signal texting app for communicating with people. I use the DuckDuckGo or the Brave browsers. Use the DuckDuckGo search bar. What else? I'm sure there's others. You guys can put some stuff in the comments below, but just try to keep your stuff online uptight because cyber attacks and those kinds of things are likely to happen. I also like to throw in considerations for power issues into this category as well, because as you know, our nation's power grid and the software systems that run it are particularly vulnerable and definitely could be affected in cyber attacks. All right, number 5 is a global pandemic. I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about a real pandemic, an actual, serious one. As it turns out, 99.7% of people are just fine when it happens with COVID. And I think we'll see that the numbers that we have been fed, about 800,000 people and all that kind of stuff dying, well, we've already learned from multiple news sources that that's not actually the real number. Those are the numbers of people who died with COVID versus the numbers of people who actually died from COVID, which is about 96% less than that, according to one source I read anyway. Who knows if that's true? Anyway, the point is that a real big and a high effect global pandemic is still overdue to happen. I don't particularly count COVID. I don't think that was one that was a natural kill-off. When we look at historical cycles long term, about every 100 years there is a big natural pandemic event that kills off a sizable percentage of the population. And I think that it's still possible that we are due for one of those. Let's see. Number 6 is economic collapse. Now, when I talk about collapse, I'm not talking about something that is unrecoverable. I'm talking about a collapse to where there is a reset of global currency or those kind of things. We've had, our currency has been reset 4 times in our history, and I'm talking about some kind of event like that. I think that there is going to be a transition to digital currency, and it'll probably be brought about or exacerbated by an economic collapse. There's a lot of bubbles going on right now. There's a lot of people who are talking about the fact that we're on an unsustainable path. Not just people like Peter Schiff and people who are always claiming doomsday, but even people like Jeremy Grantham, who is one of the world's largest investment folks. He has recently said that he thinks that we're looking at a pretty sharp collapse here. I think he said 50% reduction in the stock market. And so who knows? I'm not an expert, not a financial expert. I don't know if that stuff will happen, but I do think that it's a possibility that that could happen. And so you want to make sure that you are not in debt, that you don't have a bunch of secured or unsecured debt if possible. Use the Dave Ramsey system. I think it's great. Just try to do what you can to get out of debt if possible. All right. Number 7 is, it kind of goes into what I was just saying, the implementation of digital currency. I do believe that this is something that the Fed's talked about it. Central bank, centrally controlled digital cryptocurrency, CBDC, I think, whatever it is. That is probably something that is going to happen within the next couple of years. Central bank digital currency. They've talked quite a bit about it. They're looking into it. My concern with this is that it gives the federal government a high degree of control over individuals. If the central banking system controls all transactions, can see all transactions, they're going to tax you more for sure. And if you're not on the politically correct list, you might not get credit. You might not get, loans. You might not get the ability to buy firearms. They might just turn your number off, your numbered account, your Fed account off, and you can't buy anything until you decide to turn in all your firearms. Who knows? Maybe that's a dystopian scenario. I don't really know. I just don't like the idea of a federal government having the ability to control all those things if they wanted to. And so to me, it's not a good thing. Number 8, social media divisiveness. I believe ultimately social media is taking us down a path of balkanization. If you look at what social media has done to our society over the last few years, it has created more and more divisiveness. It's pushing us into 2 separate echo chambers. People on the right, people on the left. Doesn't matter to me which side you're in. The thing is that if you're always in an echo chamber and you only hear other people with your opinions, you're more likely to villainize the people on the other side. And when that happens, it pushes us down a path of to a point where it's possible that we could see our country start to break up and balkanize into, red states and blue states. That's not necessarily good because if that happens, that will probably lead to some sort of civil war or some sort of large regional conflict at some point, and that's not good. We don't want that kind of civil unrest in our country. Number 9, World War III. Could we see multiple altercations happening all at once devolve into a larger world war? Or could that lead to some sort of an invasion of the U.S. homeland by China? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think that's very realistic that we would see some sort of invasion to the USA. China's military is still about 10 years behind ours, even though they have hypersonic missiles. The rest of their military is just not as large as ours, not as advanced as ours, and all that kind of stuff. They've only got 2 aircraft carriers. I think we've got like 14. It would seem unlikely that they're capable of conducting any kind of a large maritime operation where they would invade us. However, it does seem possible to me that there could be some conflicts kicked up or started off over the whole Russia and Ukraine thing, especially if NATO got involved. Let's say the Spanish ships that just went into the Black Sea got into an altercation with Russia, and then Russia and Spain start fighting. Now they are part of the NATO country, or Spain is a NATO country, and we are, according to Chapter 5 in the NATO Accords, we're supposed to be defending them, and now we find ourselves in a fight with Russia. If that happens, China is most definitely going to go in and take control of the South China Sea and Taiwan, and then that could lead into a whole regional conflict in Asia and that part of the world, and so that would be awful. That's a worst case scenario. I don't think it's going to happen like that, but situations have been more crazy in the past, and so it's possible that those things could happen. I think it's a better than 80% chance that they don't happen, but who knows? Weirder things have happened, right? Let's see. Where were we at? Number 10. Massive solar flare or coronal mass ejection. Now, mathematically, this is just a matter of time. Eventually, we are going to be hit with a solar flare that will probably knock out a portion or all of our electric grid. It might be 100 years from now. I have no idea. It could be tomorrow. I don't know. What I do know is that eventually we're going to be hit. Now, what that timeline looks like, it's hard to say. I think I did some research on this, and if I remember correctly, we have every morning when we wake up, we have a 1 in 34 chance of being hit by a coronal mass ejection, I think is what the research said. Don't hold me to that. But 1 in 34 is not great, but it resets every day, right? So, it's like playing Russian roulette with 34 bullets in the gun or 34 cylinders and only 1 bullet. So it could happen, and it probably will happen. So yeah, we got to think about that. Our power grid is currently vulnerable to that kind of thing. So you want to have a way to be somewhat self-sufficient when it comes to power production, power generation. That's why I got the generator for the house here. I've got a couple of smaller generators over there. We've got some solar panels if we needed to break those out to charge up the Energy Kodiak. Just think about power generation, you know. I've got the offer to everybody who watches this. If you want to put up an EMP shield in your home to protect the items inside of your home from getting destroyed, like your freezers and your refrigerators, and those kinds of things, you just the small, my dogs are getting feisty over here, small appliances and that kind of stuff, then you can put an EMP shield on your home. I've done some videos on this in the past. You can take a look at those. But use the discount code Reality Survival. It'll save you $50 per unit. That knocks them from like $360, I think they are, down to like $300, $310, something like that. So you can do that as well. Now, the last item, the bonus item on the list is artificial intelligence. Tesla recently announced that they're going to be creating the Tesla bot, and they should have a prototype within a year, and that is a person-like looking robot that is supposed to be smaller in frame and not as fast and all that kind of stuff, but it's basically going to be like a manual labor kind of artificial intelligence enhanced robot. I think it's great. I think it's really cool about all this kind of cool technology that's coming out. We just have to be careful about moderating the moral standards and the moral coding so that we don't end up with some sort of Skynet Terminator kind of situation. I think it's going to be pretty easy to avoid that kind of thing, but there are some serious people in this space who are highly concerned about it. And so, you know, we need to pay attention to that kind of stuff and keep an eye on those kind of developments and make sure that our elected leaders are also thinking about what sort of laws should be enacted to govern those kind of things, if there should be oversight bodies for artificial intelligence and that kind of stuff. So anyway, I think I've rambled quite enough. What do you guys think will be the most likely scenarios? Just do the 5 most likely scenarios to happen down in the comments below. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, I definitely appreciate it when you click the thumbs up button and when you share it with your friends. Don't forget to live 6 Ps. Proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. Stay safe, guys.